I've owned and ridden this 300L Rally for over a year now. I just got back from over 500 miles riding it in Death Valley, and I figured it's probably about time I sit down and actually review this bike and talk about why I sold my 450L BDR Slayer that I spent a year building and kept this bike. The most useful piece of background information for you to have before I jump into how I feel about this bike after owning it for over a year is this. For the longest time, I simply did not understand the purpose or the reasoning behind the rally model of the 250L and the 300L. People would ask me about it all the time. As a guy that used to own a 250L, I started riding off-road on a 250L, and I would always say, I don't understand the point of that bike. It's heavier, it has more fairings that can get broken. Why don't you just get the regular 250L or 300L instead? And that remained my opinion until I decided to buy this bike from our friend Slow Eddie. Go subscribe to him. Mostly just for testing and content creation purposes. Not really because it was a bike that I was dying to ride. Instantly on my first ride, my eyes were opened to a new world that I never even imagined possible, and I started to understand the point of this bike and just how unique it really is in terms of what you get in a stock package out of the gate. This is a true light adventure bike, and we'll talk about what that means in a little bit in a way that no other motorcycle on the market is. Before we get into all of that, let's talk about the basic stats, just in case you're not familiar with this bike. I just took these from the 2024 model year, but I don't think they've changed at all. This is a 2021. It's a 286cc liquid-cooled single-cylinder engine with 27-ish horsepower. It has a Showa inverted fork and a Showa shock with 10.2 inches of travel front and rear. Ground clearance is 10.9 inches. Stock seat height on the Rally is 35.2 inches, and on the non-Rally is 34.7 inches. The tank on the Rally is 3.4 gallons, the non-Rally is 2.1, and the Rally weighs 331 pounds or 335 pounds for the ABS model. The non-Rally regular 300L is 306 pounds or 311 pounds for the ABS model. So this bike has many pros. Let me run you down my favorites after owning it for a year. First, long maintenance intervals, 8,000 mile oil changes, 16,000 mile valve checks, and even then it's a Honda, so if you didn't do the valve check, you're probably fine. I haven't heard anybody saying these things are wildly out of spec after 16,000 miles. So to put that into perspective, this is a 2021 that I bought from Eddie, who put a ton of miles on it, and it only has 6,500 or 7,000 miles on it right now. So technically, we didn't even have to do an oil change before now. Now you should still do it yearly, and I've been doing that. He rode this hard, and so have I, but technically, it's still within the second maintenance interval after the break-in. It's got that Honda reliability. I don't even really need to say anything else about that. This thing will just start up and go no matter where you are, and that is whether you're good at maintenance or you neglect it entirely. This bike has seen some hard use, both from Eddie and from me, and you know, I've gone through and refreshed it and replaced parts, but it's never not run, and it will continue to do so until the end of time, as far as I can tell, if it's anything like my 250L was. The fairing and the windscreen, the Rally Tower, this is stock. Ignore the giant loop pronghorn strap holding the windshield on. We'll talk about that in a minute. But all of this extra fairing and the windscreen are stock, and those work to make the bike more comfortable, both on the road, on the highway, and also just off-road at higher speeds in a way that no other dual sport is. You're not in the naked air. It's got a lot more adventure bike feel because of that. It has a bigger tank than most dual sports, so your range is greatly increased. Most dual sports, almost all the ones that I've owned, have about a 2-gallon tank. This is almost 3.5. It's a dual sport, and the thing about this bike is it barely feels different than a stock KLX 300 or a CRF300L off-road, and that was one of the first things that amazed me about it when I got on it. After I bought it, was jumping on, and I was like, oh, this doesn't feel like anything other than a dual sport. It rides like one. It's got that off-road capability and confidence-inspiringness. Whatever, of a dual sport. Feels like a dual sport. It's incredibly easy to work on for the most part. Things like the air filter is easy to get to. The fairings do kind of get in the way. We'll talk about that in the cons. It's only 335 pounds, which is heavy for a dual sport. It's almost 100 pounds more than a KTM 500 EXCF, but it's not heavy for an off-road bike. This is not a heavy off-road bike. 330 is nice compared to, say, an Africa Twin at 505 pounds, things like that. MSRP is only $6,200 on this bike. It's super cheap, and it is a smooth, easy-to-ride motorcycle. I was continually impressed and commenting to myself during my time in Death Valley this week about how smooth the clutch is, how easy it is to ride. It's a great bike to learn to ride a motorcycle on because it's very forgiving, smooth, not herky-jerky necessarily. The fueling can be with fuel injection, but use the clutch. Brakes are smooth. Everything just feels solid and easy, and it's just not the kind of bike that's going to get away from you or be intimidating. You can get ABS on it, which is great, particularly if you're spending a bunch of time on the road. It's a beginner-friendly bike, but it's capable enough, in my opinion, to entertain novice and intermediate riders, and even say an advanced rider who just wants to take things a little slower and not do so much maintenance these days. This bike is hella fun. I've seen riders from the entire spectrum on these things. I've seen people that I was shocked that they bought this bike because I knew how good of a rider they were, and I've seen brand new people on their very first motorcycle on this, and I fall in the middle of that somewhere, and all of us have had a great time with it. It's the perfect bike for like rallies because what you get is dual sport capability and ease of riding, but the increased fuel capacity and range makes it so that, like at the Death Valley Rally, I know that I keep talking about it, but this stuff applies to all the other rallies I go to too. Stuff is often far away. You got to ride a ways, particularly like at Giant Loop, you got to ride sometimes an hour to get to the cool off-road riding at that rally. And this bike has the stock fuel capacity, doesn't need an extra tank like I had to add to my 450L. You don't have to carry a gas bag or anything like that. You've got the range to get where you want to get, and then it's light and easy to ride when you get there. There's a ton of aftermarket for this bike, been out for a while, which is awesome. And there's lots of people riding them, which means big community, lots of people to ask questions, and also just instant friends at rallies. When you see someone else at a rally on a rally, you're instantly rally buddies. This happened to me just last weekend, many times. It's also hella durable. This bike has been beat to hell. Eddie did not treat it nicely, and neither have I. It's been down. I was ringing it out at 10,000 RPMs in third gear trying to go uphill against the headwind this last weekend. Like, we have ridden this bike hard, and it just takes it in stride and keeps going, and I have zero concerns about it. There's a lot to like about this bike, but there's also a lot of things that could be better. For $6,200, what else do you expect? There's gonna be some weak points, so let's talk about those, the cons about this bike in my opinion. Number one con I discovered this last weekend, it doesn't have a lot of torque. So out in Death Valley, we were like down at 200 feet below sea level, and then we had to go up to 5,000 feet and then back down into the valley on the other side where camp was, which is like 1,800 feet. That's all within the space of 20 miles. And so going uphill like that, and I'm a heavier rider, I would had it pinned in third and fourth gear trying to go 60 miles an hour. So it's not a fast bike on the road. You're not gonna get anywhere fast. And while it's fine on flat ground, you can usually maintain 60, 65, 70. Going uphill is gonna be a battle. You're always gonna have to downshift and run the revs up. And just understand that you're not going to be able to keep up with traffic in a super hilly, mountainous area. It's not a bike that's going to be easy to just ride wherever you want without thinking about it, because you are going to have to plan ahead. You're not going to be able to pass as much. You're just going to have to take your time and go at a more measured pace. There was a headwind the second day on the way back over the same pass, and I was in third gear pinned at 10,000 RPMs, and I was only able to go 50 miles an hour. Now, again, I'm a heavy rider, I'm a wide rider. A lighter rider will have a better experience because of this bike's power to weight ratio, but it's not the greatest highway bike ever. And some of the other dual sports you can buy have a little bit more horsepower. They're better on the highway. They're uncomfortable for other reasons, but you're not fighting to go 60, 65. It's lacking in torque to pull a heavier rider like me up hills at low speeds. This is another thing I ran into a bunch last weekend, is like I was trying to climb hills in second gear and kind of maneuver slowly around technical stuff. There was a lot of it out there, shockingly, rocks in Death Valley, who knew? And there was a lot of times when I was revving it and using the clutch to keep the RPMs up, to keep my momentum going, and I should have probably downshifted into first, but I just refuse to do that unless I absolutely have to, because I prefer second gear. So trying to do my preferred second gear thing, there were times when I was like, oh man, I'm not sure if I'm gonna make it up this hill. Again, I'm twice the weight of the rider this bike was designed for, so if you're lighter than me, you may experience these things less, but it is a concern for me. Tops out at 60 to 65 miles per hour, depending on the conditions, maybe 70 on flat ground, at least for me. So it's not really a freeway bike. This is you wanna take the highways, the back roads where you can. You can pop onto the freeway, but just understand that you're not gonna be able to keep up with traffic easily. And if there's a hill or a wind or something like that, it's not like super scary on the freeway in the way that some of the light, super light bikes can be. It's got a little bit more weight, so it feels a little bit more planted. You're getting blown around less, but you just can't keep up. And you have to be okay with that, or you have to plan on riding somewhere else. It's not an adventure bike. Okay, I said it was a light adventure bike. I didn't say it was an adventure bike. It doesn't have the street chops that adventure bikes have. It's more comfortable on the highway than a dual sport, but it's still a dual sport. The windscreen flies off without permission at times, or at least it did for me on this last trip. Now, that's probably because I lost the factory well nuts and replaced them with some cheapo Amazon ones, and I had a camera on there, and it was extra weight plus all the vibration of all the rocky terrain did it in, but that's why this is strapped on with a pronghorn strap right now, which fixed it instantly, which was great, but you know, like all Honda windscreens that I've been around, it's mounted with those weird well nuts, which work until they don't. It's an inexpensive bike, so it lacks basic features. It doesn't have a fancy display. It doesn't have a built-in charger. You got to wire that in yourself. You're going to have to add a few things to it to make it comfortable and usable in a lot of situations if you're going to do a lot of miles on it. The stock seat is not comfortable. All dual sports are like that. Anyone who's ridden this bike or the 250L will tell you the same thing. The biggest and most noticeable weak point is the suspension. The forks are squishy, they're soft, they deflect in weird ways, and I bottomed it out super hard jumping off a ledge this high into a water crossing, which is why my windscreen flew off. I'm gonna stop saying I'm a heavier rider because you figured that out by now, but the point is this is a suspension that is tuned and set up to make it easy to ride on the street, to absorb little bumps. It doesn't do well with big bumps, which means on the stock suspension, you just can't go that fast off-road. You can go reasonably fast. I'm not saying it's not fun, but you're not gonna be bombing, doubling up whoops and stuff in the sand on this bike on the stock suspension. Probably my least favorite thing about this bike is the stock suspension. And it's not my favorite bike to work on. I had a hell of a time this last time just because of the fairings. There's a lot of them. There's massive things. They're covering up stuff that should be easier to get to. And when you add crash bars to the mix, like you literally can't get this fairing off without taking this crash bar off and vice versa. It is a harder bike to work on. It's not my favorite bike to work on. It's nothing like the Transalp in terms of holy crap, I don't want to work on it ever again. But while the easy routine maintenance stuff is easy to get to, air filter, oil filter, stuff like that, in general, more involved repairs I don't enjoy as much on this bike. So pros, cons. After over a year, a couple thousand miles of riding and owning this bike, what do I think about it? Well, let me just sum it up this way. I spent a year and over $3,000-ish turning my CRF300L into what this bike is directly out of the factory the second it hits the dealership floor and gets put together. This is a true factory-built light adventure bike, and there's nothing else like it that exists that I'm aware of. Now, I can already hear the comments coming. This isn't an adventure bike, it's a dual sport. I didn't say adventure bike, I said light adventure bike. So if you go in and Google or search on YouTube for a light adventure bike, you're gonna find a bunch of builds of people taking 500EXCFs, CRF450Ls, dual sport bikes that are very capable and adding things like fairings, gas tanks, better seats to make them more highway capable or at least more highway comfortable so that you can ride the long distances, ride the fun stuff, and then ride the bike home more comfortably and easily. Basically the perfect BDR bike, BDR Slayer. That's what I was making with my 450L. That's a light adventure bike. Argue in the comments if you want, but I'm not talking about a Versys X300 or an adventure bike that weighs less. I'm talking about a dual sport converted to be more adventure bikey. That's what a light adventure bike seems to be in the common parlance. The 300L Rally is this from the factory in a way that no other bike is. Yes, you could argue the Cove kind of fulfills this niche. It is a very capable off-road bike with a big gas tank and a rally fairing. The seat is kind of garbage, but it is not designed to be ridden on the road, and it's not a great road bike. I have limited time with it, but based on my experience plus what other people have told me, you tolerate the road, but you don't look forward to it. I asked a bunch of people about their Coves. There were a ton at the rally last weekend. It isn't the most powerful or capable dual sport. It's not as good off-road as a 500 EXCF or my 450L was, but it's inexpensive, has great fuel range, is easy to ride, and it has more versatility than any other stock dual sport on the market. Yes, even the 690-701, because they're still just big dual sports. They need fairings, gas tanks, better seats to become light ADV bikes. For the beginner to novice rider or advanced rider just looking for an easy, smooth ride, you cannot beat the value you get with this thing right out of the gate in stock form. You give up almost nothing off-road versus the regular 300L when you get the Rally. It has the same suspension travel. It has 0.3 inches less clearance. You're not going to notice that. 24 pounds more weight. Yes, that's heavier, but you don't really notice it. It feels very different than even a small ADV bike. And I have a light-ish ADV bike in the garage. I have the 790, which is 438 pounds, supposedly, stock, wet, and the Transalp is 460, stock, wet. Those are lighter adventure bikes. This is 320 pounds. There's a reason why I took it to Death Valley and not those bikes. In stock form, the bike will comfortably cruise at 65 or 70 miles an hour, just not uphill, and allow you to take on any dirt road you find alongside the highway. It's not the best suspension, but you can take on easy to intermediate terrain and even dip your toe into the harder stuff occasionally in stock form. By the time you outgrow this bike skills-wise, you will know whether you want to move over to a true ADV bike that's bigger and more highway friendly, or into a more capable dual sport bike because you enjoy the gnarly difficult stuff. Or maybe you stay right in the middle because it hits the perfect sweet spot for you. That is a very real possibility. All dual sports require compromises. A more capable bike like a 500 EXCF or a Beta 390 is going to be miles better off-road but suck on the pavement in stock form. A 690 or a 701 has the bigger tank and is much more capable off-road than the Honda here, but it costs almost twice as much. So if you buy a Rally, you have a lot of money left over for suspension upgrades, which is the biggest weak point of the bike, in my opinion, or a new exhaust, or just tons of gas to get out and ride the damn thing. And you can spend your time riding because you only have to do an oil change once a year or so because of the 8,000 mile oil change interval. I do think that if you shore up that suspension, you have a pretty capable, pretty fun bike. It's still not fast, but you can ride it on the highway and go just about anywhere if you understand the compromises you're making. I realize it's not as capable as my 450L build turned out to be, but honestly on the highway I'd rather be on the 300. The 450L let me ride faster, but I can go to pretty much all the same places with this thing. Case in point, day 2 of the Death Valley Rally. When that video comes out, you'll see it. I was riding with Big Rock Moto on his brand new Husky FE501S. We did Lippincott Pass and the washout sections through Saline Valley, which are in bad shape right now. He and I went to all the same places. He rode faster than me. He probably had an easier time than I did, but his bike cost $13,000. Mine cost $6,200 new, and I paid less for that when I bought it used. And I might add, we rode around all day. I went everywhere he went, and I didn't run out of gas, and he did. It's not exciting. It's not spectacular at anything, but it's good at everything. It's a true light adventure bike out of the gate in the way that no other bike is that you buy off the showroom floor. It's a unique bike. It's a unicorn, in my opinion and experience, and it only costs $6,200. If you've owned and ridden a Rally, what do you think? Leave your experiences in the comments. I have a full playlist of Honda CRF300L Rally videos, including camping in the snow, trail riding, single track, all kinds of stuff on this bike that you can check out. I'll link that for you. Please consider subscribing to the channel if you're interested in more dual sport off-road shenanigans, adventure bike stuff, reviews, and other commentary and content. Thank you for watching, and please do not forget to be excellent to each other. Thank you.